Okay, good evening. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. We have a quorum, established a quorum, so thanks everybody for their attendance. And as always, thanks everybody to you that are here in attendance as well. All right, Sandy, item number 2 is, do we have anybody desiring to address the board this evening? Okay, thank you. Item number 3 is the Chancellor's report. Dr. Wallace.
But I would like to request, if you're willing to go a little bit out of order this evening, if we could move to discussion and action items, consideration of approving resolution for the board regarding Freeport goods so we can get a presentation from GEDC first and get that established. Is that okay if we take that out of order?
Yes, I don't see any reason that we can't do that. So we will, at this time, go ahead and move to discussion item number, which one is that? D. Thank you very much.
So I'll preface just a bit as they're moving forward. The Gainesville Economic Development Center is coming forward to request consideration of what you have seen as a resolution for Freeport exemption. They'll give you information on what that includes. Also, I've got added information I'm going to hand out to you right now that are just brought this evening. One of the things, too, that I have looked at is there are several community colleges in the state that have already adopted these, about 20 plus, so that you're aware that this isn't new for community colleges. And so Mr. Presson will begin, I believe, for us this evening. Okay. You bet.
Thank you.
If you'll take one of those and pass it down.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace and board. We are requesting this because we have been asked by local industry. Actually, when I moved here, I was looking at what the makeup was, the tools and the economic development tools that we had to work with. And I was surprised to find that out of the whole county, there were only 2 entities that were participating in Freeport exemption. And those 2 entities, or 3, but 2 inside the city of Gainesville. The 3 entities in the whole county are the city of Gainesville, and then the hospital district in Gainesville and the hospital district in Munster. When we are working with prospects and existing local industry, this gets brought up very often. And so I started talking with the board first part of kind of the middle of last year about that we needed to pursue this. It's not something that it just needs to be done now by the end of February or first part of March so that we can communicate that to the Central Appraisal District and they can do their roles, pull their roles together. But Freeport is an exemption that really applies to the primary target is manufacturers, and they get the goods, the inventory in, and Freeport gives them the opportunity to claim an exemption if those goods or if that inventory is transferred out of the state before 175 days. So if it stays in the state for 175 days or more, they have to pay tax on it. The variety of companies in the area that claim it have anywhere between 24% and 93% that they claim as Freeport. Saffron would be the 93%. As you can imagine, a lot of their product leaves the state of Texas whenever it's done. So and talking to the board about this, just looking at trying to get this in place with more entities like the college and the county and the school districts, which are all able to participate in this and just haven't been. And it's been surprising to me because as I work throughout the state in different locations and prepping pitches or proposals to these prospects, we don't even see the prospects if we're not at what they refer to as a triple Freeport, which is the city, the college, and the school district. If a city and the county and the school district, city and the county and the school district, that's what most industry refers to as triple Freeport because that's the big 3 taxes. Now, what they really want, if you've got any other taxing entities, they want you to participate in it as well, but they will call and ask, do you have triple Freeport? Well, we have 2 Freeport in Gainesville, but it's only really a single Freeport from what the site selectors are looking for. Well, if we don't have triple Freeport, a lot of time that gets us just knocked off the list from the beginning. And we don't even know that there was a prospect out there if we don't have that, what they consider that designation. So as we were talking about this, and I'm visiting with some of the other local industry, from a business engagement, business expansion point of view, some of them have brought up this as one of their big hurdles here locally. And when they're looking at where they store their inventory, they can store, for example, if Saffron, they have a warehouse in Denton County, they can store their inventory in Denton County, and it receives Freeport exemption, and we don't get that inventory in-house in Gainesville. And that's actually in Lindsay ISD, in Gainesville, and the county. So it affects their operations of how whenever they're looking at where they want to store their inventory, they consider these other locations because it's 93% tax free on that inventory sitting in the warehouse. And they turn the inventory frequently. So it's a big factor whenever you're looking at on Saffron. They've got last year was an $81 million inventory, and 93% of that is that's the 93% that is Freeport claimed. So they've got $88 million total in value. So it's a major factor whenever they're paying Lindsay ISD school tax, college tax, and county tax on that inventory. It's a significant cost of doing business at their Gainesville location. This is not just about Saffron. I'm just using them as an example because they're the one with the highest percentage. So we're asking that, and Will's going to go into some more detail on the numbers of this because he's the numbers expert, and we're asking the participation in this so we have a tool to work with our existing industry as well as to recruit other industry to help grow and expand our tax base.
Okay, thanks guys for allowing us here. So I'm Will Presson. I'm Vice President at EDC, and I'm here in that capacity. But the Texas Property Tax Code under 11251 allows a Freeport good. As William stated, that good is brought into the county, to this municipality, into the college district, and it's here for a temporary period of time, which is 175 days or less, and then it's shipped out of state. And it does not include any oil or gas assets. So it's really geared toward manufacture. The gist of it is it's really hold harmless. You have some handouts that show the 11 that actually qualified. So you file an application with the appraisal district under 11251 of the tax code. You file the application prior to 4/1, and then if approved, typically there's a lot of documentation that go with that. And the way you document that is you take your prior year sales. So if you had a client that, if you had a company in this county, they would provide their sales from the prior year. That percentage of those sales that were shipped out of state. So if they sold $1 million worth of gadgets and 50% of those or 500,000 of those were shipped out of state within that 175 days, well, then as a 1/125, when you look through that window as your value, that percentage of that inventory, that 50%, would be exempted. The key to it is that for the college, it's hold harmless. And the way that would work is when you do your effective tax rate calculation, your effective rate is a rate necessary to generate the prior year's value. So when you're in this increasing value, so the college's value increased roughly 11% from 23 to 24. And obviously you couldn't increase you didn't get to keep 11% of that revenue because of legislation. And so you're limited with a 3.5% bump. And so when you do your effective rate calculation, and when you look at, if you look at the sheet that shows the value, if 100% of all the items were allowed, and we know that it wasn't, well, there was $123 million in value, times your rate of the 0.0945, you can see what that amount would have been. But in saying that, you are held harmless because you had an 11% increase in value year over year. You went from, in 23, you had a net taxable value of roughly 6.8 billion. This past year in 24, you were 7.6 billion, rough numbers. And so roughly 11% increase in value. The actual levy on that, you had an increase of almost $742,000. So it's a great economic development tool. We feel like it's really needed in our county at this time. We've got some really exciting businesses looking to come to. We've got an industrial park. We've got all types of existing businesses that need this, and it's been available in the property tax code. I think it was enacted in '86 or '87. But we're happy to answer any questions. But we would happy to answer any questions. And the key is that as long as we're in this environment, and over the past 30 years, your values have continued to go up. I think it's averaged about 8% over the last 20 years, as far back as I could go. But where it would negatively affect you guys would be if we were in a decreasing, if our values were going the other way. And then at that point, you would lose revenue on it. But it's a great economic development tool. And then the reality of it is we hope that it will bring in other businesses that will then go on the tax roll, and then it's going to lessen the burden for your local property owners. And that's the idea of the Freeport exemption. And that's how it's worked historically for all these surrounding entities that have enabled that Freeport exemption.
The county and the ISD. Is that correct?
That's what, when you're talking with industry about sites, that's what they refer to as triple Freeport. They ask, do you have triple Freeport exemption?
So where are you with the county and the ISD?
So we meet with Civils Bend ISD tomorrow. We're on Gainesville ISD's next February board meeting, and really positive. The school districts are held harmless. Austin reimburses the school districts, and so the only piece on the school district that is not would be their INS rate. So Civils Bend does not have any type of INS. They have no debt service. Gainesville has a little debt service, but there again, it's going to be hold harmless to them because we're in this increasing market when values are continuing to increase at 8 to 12% a year for our local taxing jurisdictions. So the county.
I'm beginning to kind of see that something about this is north of Gainesville instead of dead center Gainesville. Am I incorrect here?
Well,
If Civils Bend's part of this?
Civils Bend, we've got an industrial park that's being developed where we've got BNSF bringing rail service in, and then you've got the airport, the big one, Safran. They really need it. So we need Lindsay ISD, we need Gainesville ISD, and we need Civils Bend, and ultimately we'd like to get all of them. So the application process, it's quite, you have to prove up your sales. You do that with good data, audited financials. And so it's not just something that's easily approved or easily handed down. Doug is with the appraisal district. It's a good process. The applications are filed by 4/1.
And do they, in the application, who approves these applications?
The appraisal district. It's like it's an exemption for your Freeported goods, and they're filed all over the state, but it would be approved by the appraisal district.
And where are you with the county of Cook right now?
Cook County, we met today. I think we've got it. They've tabled it, so we're going to meet with them in 2 weeks. We meet with them in February 10th, and I think we've answered all their questions.
And when is the deadline for this?
So the application's due by 4/1, but as you know, in the appraisal district world, you're looking through that window as a 1/1. So returns are being filed now, personal property returns. So this is file your personal property, which is state mandated. It's got machinery, equipment, computers, furniture, fixtures, and it's got inventory. So the only component of that personal property return is the inventory. That's the only thing we're talking about. Nothing else. No machinery, equipment, no vehicles, just the inventory piece of a personal property return. So Freeport application is due 4/1, whereas your personal property return is not due until 4/15. So we know early on who those companies and what those companies are going to be that are going to file for a Freeport exemption.
Do we have a February board meeting?
Sorry.
No, I mean,
She was talking.
no, we can. We normally have not, but if we were requiring one to do that, we could. Why we don't typically have a February board meeting is because we have a late January with the holiday, and then we do a late March because of spring break. So we end up where we have a 2-week, sometimes only turnaround between that and the February. You're not going to have financials usually prepped for February by the time that happens, and so we haven't in the past, and we don't have it as a regularly scheduled board meeting.
What is Dr. Miller's take on this?
I think the net benefit to the college far exceeds any cost to the college. I think if you look at our tax rolls, huge percentage of what we received is based on real property. We get very little revenue right now from personal property. It's like out of over $7-8 billion worth of total value, less than $1 billion is personal property, and the inventory is going to be a subset of that. So as it is now, it's a very small number, but the ability for new industry to come in and still pay property tax, full tax, and employees that they hire, I just think the net benefit, it would definitely outweigh any perceived cost to the college.
I have a question. I believe when this was discussed earlier, the net tax that the college would be, I guess, leaving off would be $15,000. Is that right, Will? 15,090.44?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, go ahead. I'm in agreement with Dr. Miller. I mean, we're going to put on the table or leave off the table or out of our budget 15,000, but the opportunity to put ourselves in a better position to gain more businesses, because, I mean, you look around. You've got Sherman. Yeah, okay. Oh, here. Thanks. I mean, there are so many of our neighboring counties that already, well, all of them already have it. And I think we're going to leave ourselves further behind. I mean, I could make an argument that we're already behind, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well, Mr. Myers, correct me if I'm wrong, Oklahoma has no property inventory tax, correct? So if you're competing, for example, with Oklahoma, not having Freeport would be an additional benefit to choosing Oklahoma, is that correct?
No, Oklahoma they have a Freeport exemption as well. The
Okay,
big
okay,
difference
I
is
see.
Our average rate's about 2% in Texas. Oklahoma's a little less than 1%. The only difference in the Oklahoma and Texas Freeport, same thing, it's got to be shipped out of the state of Oklahoma, but it's 180 days versus the 175. But they have the advantage because of they're half our tax rate.
Okay.
All right.
I wanted to point out this sheet that has this is, Dr. Wallace, y'all asked for this list of colleges that participate. There are 50 college districts in the state, and 30 of them participate in this. The highlighted ones are those that are just contiguous or very close to us. One that I don't have highlighted on here is Lamar County, and that's where Parrish Junior College is. They have a population of about 50 to 51,000, and they've got 37 companies that participate in this and claim 174 million in Freeport value. They've got a lot of industry, and they're getting more. And they are a direct competitor of ours. Grayson College, Grayson County is a direct competitor of ours, and Wise County is a direct competitor of ours. Those are all similar populations if you stretch a little bit to include Grayson County. But then Denton County to the south of us and the Metroplex. And There's not a project that looks at us that doesn't look at Wise County or Grayson County or Lamar County. And this is something that, like I said, we don't even hear about an opportunity if we're not triple Freeport, because that's the lion's share of the tax burden is the city, the county, and the school districts.
Madam Chair, can I just make one more statement? I think it's important to understand too, for example, if an industry comes into Cook County, or Gainesville specifically, let's say, and they're building a facility that's worth $500 million, we are still earning the M&O rate on the facility and the property.
Yes.
This is only exempting past $20 million of inventory, correct? I think we're capping it, or are
No.
we capping it even?
That's on a specific project.
Okay, okay.
Looking at that's on the
So it could be that they could vary what kind of project. Some, one group may say our Freeport, so it's any inventory, basically.
It is, and it's
Right, right.
and the percentage that they qualify varies year to year based on the info that Will said they have to submit. They have to apply for it every year. And what you're doing, if you approved a resolution, you're giving the appraisal district then the authority to apply that Freeport to your tax rate, to your portion of the tax.
and-
Right
and
now, they
so-
just have the city
right.
and 2 hospitals.
Well, and I think it's also important for the board to understand too, that we would hope that as a part of that as well, you would get the continuing education, the technical training, the educational value of industry growth. You would hope that that would be a natural part of it as well. And it benefits those that are currently here, local employees, employers that are having that now. It would
Yes.
benefit Trident, for example, or
Yes.
some of those local companies. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, since this is a discussion and possible action, I would entertain a motion to consider the approving a resolution of the NCTC board authorizing, wait a minute.
I so moved.
Okay, thanks. Oh, yes, for the ad valorem taxation of the Freeport goods. Okay, so we have a motion by Lisa and a second by, I heard Mr. Henderson first, so I'm sorry. Okay, additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand, please. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. You're welcome. Let's get that industry here.
Yeah, no, bring it.
All right, very good. Okay, well, we'll go back now to the
Yes, I'm
Chancellor's
so
report.
sorry. Thank you
That's
very
okay.
much. It's hard to believe we're in a new semester again, and it started with another new year, but the semester is also coinciding with a legislative session, and several of you, in fact, we are very excited to say that 5 of our board members will be attending the community colleges days with our students here in the next few days. That'll be here before we realize it. It's going to be interesting. So the 89th Texas legislative session has begun. They started on January 14th. It'll run until June 2nd. It's interesting, and I'll provide a written follow-up for you all if you'd like to know more details. But we see a very similar split, 88 Republicans, 62 Democrats, but we're seeing a lot of new representatives for our area that we're having to get to know and to advocate our mission and our scope for them. Both the chambers have done some things that are a little different. Most notably, the Education Committee that was established and renamed the Committee on Education for K-16. So if you remember last session, the Lieutenant Governor took the Senate committee that was 2 committees, Education, Public Ed, and Higher Ed, morphed them into one and had a subcommittee for Higher Ed. Carla, I think you even testified to that group at one point, and I know I did. They have now morphed that into one without the subcommittee that is a K-16, and they've reduced the size of those that are a part of it. So it's gone from a 13-member board or committee to 11. Now, notably, we're in an interesting position in the sense, actually, I think that went 15 to from 17. We have 2 of our senators that have been appointed to that, which I think is interesting. So for sure, Senator Hagenbu, Brent Hagenbu, is new to Cook County. He, if you remember, took Senator Springer's place, and then also Senator Tan Parker are both on those. They are very strong advocates. We've already been communicating with them about House Bill 8 and the desire for those appropriations to come further incentivizing that. So it was interesting that that move took place. That is a bipartisan-led committee. Senator Brandon Creighton, who was also involved in passing House Bill 8's legislation, is chair again, and still a Democratic co-chair in Donna Howard from Austin. She's been on that role for quite a while as well. We have a new speaker, so we're trying to figure out what that may look like. Representative Dustin Burrows was elected as speaker, so we'll be working with his team. He's transitioning some things, and there's a lot of conversation going on there. I will tell you this, a couple of updates that are very important for the board to know. The governor's office has reached out to community colleges in the state, and we are a part. We have been included in the tuition and fee freeze for 2 years. I leave that to the board's discretion. I'm about to share something that's probably not politically correct, but I owe my due diligence to you all and not to anyone else. Legally, that is not something the governor can do. It is not for community colleges. He cannot legally require tuition and fees to be frozen. If you remember, the freeze that occurred with universities was part of a rider that was passed. However, he has full veto power in the state that if you don't align or wouldn't choose to align, you might have your funding cut or something, those things. So all the colleges are saying, okay, we'll agree, that's fine, but I do feel like I owe you. Some of the colleges are fighting back a little with legal counsel. I don't advise that at all. I don't think that benefits us. I do think I'm thankful to Dr. Bellows for recommending a higher increase than we presented last time, because that helps us a little bit with knowing that these 2 years will be that way, but I needed you to be aware of that. Lots of expansion bills to exempting students from tuition. There's an exemption bill for foster care. There's an exemption bill for any child or student involved in the CPS organization. There's an exempted bill for veterans siblings that they would not pay tuition, and there's an exemption bill for certain education degrees where the degree becomes free to anyone that wants to take advantage of that in the state. But there's no funding to help support those bills, so we'll bring more of that as we come. You're going to hear the official enrollment report post-12th class day, so that will come to you in the March meeting. But spring enrollments had a noticeable increase this year. We're up 6.8, 6.7% overall, reflecting a huge growth honestly, in our international student population. It's been very interesting. We have about 112% increase in international students. Now, these are students that are here this is not a part of the conversation with undocumented, et cetera. These are truly defined as international students. They must be full-time at 12 hours minimally. Most of them take 15. They have to pay out-of-state tuition. So that particular cohort of students is generating right around 1.2 million in tuition and fees this semester. So that is a very interesting thing. We're not sure why, but we've become very popular among a group that joined some of their students last year, and they've come in. So enrollment looks very favorable and has continued to grow. Later in the agenda, you'll be calling for a vote on the election. So we remind you that there'll be a board election, and that takes place. Deadline for filing, which you'll talk about later probably, but deadline's the 14th of February, and the actual election, if you call it, will be on May 3rd. So that will be coming up as well. Unless there's other questions, that's all I have for this evening, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you for that report. The next item would be the informative reports, and the first item is the executive committee report. We did meet, and we, as always, approved the agenda. We did have a presentation about the Freeport exemption to understand that we brought to the board this evening for full approval, and some other important things that Dr. Wallace actually just mentioned as a part of that report. And the next item would be the finance report.
meetings to review with you. We met on December 11th, had our formal review of last year's audit with Mr. Dane Legg from Lot Vernon and Associates. He discussed some of the key financial elements and took any questions from the committee. Then when that was finished, Dr. Miller presented some accounting controls that were updated from last year's audit. We were pleased to see those had been implemented. We also met on January the 21st. We discussed the first quarter investment report that will appear later in the agenda. We also had a discussion about the Freeport exemption, which we just approved, how that would or could impact our finances. We discussed the governor's tuition freeze, and then we also, it was noted for the first time in a long time that we receive a greater percentage of our revenue from the state than we do from student tuition and fees, and that's a direct result of HB 8. We reviewed November and December financials, and then we adjourned.
Okay, thank you for that report. And then the building and IT report, did not meet. Okay, thank you. I see here that we have staff reports, so the finance for November and December. Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Regent Morris just explained, on December 11th, Mr. Dane Legg presented the annual audit for fiscal year 2024 to the Finance Committee, went over those results and answered questions from the committee members. And I wanted to make sure you were aware that you should have a copy of that final audit at your desk tonight. And please know you are welcome to take that with you. If you want to leave it, I'll collect it afterwards. That's fine too, whatever you choose to do with it. But I definitely wanted you to know that I would definitely be open to answering any questions you may have about anything. You may not have had a chance to look over it right now, but if in the coming weeks you have any question, please reach out, give me a call. I'll be happy to answer those questions for you. And also for any other interested parties, whether they're in attendance tonight or watching on our live stream, I would say that the audit has been posted to our website, so it's readily available to anyone who may have any interest in looking at the college's current finances. So it is out on the website. Also, getting to the financials, we actually, since it's been a while since we've met, you have two sets of financials in your materials. Have financials for November and for December. And the first thing that I would like to call your attention to is if you would look at the sheet called Budget Comparison, it's typically the second page of each monthly report. And honestly, you can either look at November or December. It really doesn't matter, because either place you'll look, you will notice that the last line under source of funds is other income, and there's a huge increase in that category from the previous year. When I'm looking here at November, last year other income was $2.4 million. This year it's $8.4 million. And I wanted to explain that discrepancy or that increase for you. And essentially, virtually all of that increase is the direct result of our tax notes. Tax notes is considered other income, and we approved and were paid those notes in September. So first month of the year, that showed up in this other income category. And so it will be somewhat overstated compared to what we would have expected to see last year. But also note that all of that revenue is recorded in September, but for the next 12 to 24 months, we will pay it out in expenses. So it's not going to hit in any one individual month on the expense side, but know that it's essentially going to get spent over the coming months. So that's the
Tax rate, what are we paying on that money?
Oh, the interest rate, I believe it was under 4%. It's 3 point something. I'd have to go back and look and see exactly what it is.
Over 4% on it?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Hang on to it as long as you want to. Don't be in a hurry.
I just have to control Robbie. If Robbie wouldn't spend all the money, we'll just keep it in there and make interest on all of it. The second thing in the financials that I wanted to point out, on the investment report that you see in the month of December is two of the last 3 pages of that report. I just wanted to point out to you some minor changes that we've had that occurred late in the year. Our board reserves are now taking advantage of higher interest rates from government securities rather than simply relying on bank CDs. We've transferred some of those CD dollars into government securities. In some cases, we're able to spread some of those maturities out as long as 24 months. We actually have taken a laddered approach to where our board reserves, about a quarter of them, are going to come due every 6 months, whether they're in CDs or in government securities. So if we need to get our hands on some of that money, which I do not expect, I really think this is money we don't have to touch. We've got plenty in tax pool for the day-to-day type of expenses, but these are glad to tie up some of these funds as long as 24 months in order to lock in interest rates. Nobody knows where interest rates are going. If they go up, our tax pool funds and other bank funds will reap the benefits. If interest rates go down, at least we'll have these locked into these government securities. We'll continue to be getting between 4.5% on those dollars. So, any questions regarding November or December financials? All right.
Okay, thank you for the reports. All right. All right, the next item is the consent agenda. We have items A through E. And if at this time, I'll take a motion to remove any of those to independently discuss if necessary. Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
I'll make that motion to accept them as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Christy Morris. We have a second. Second by Erica Sullivan. Okay, additional discussion. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand, please. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next item is discussion and action on item number 6, which would be A, consideration of approving a contract for the building renovations to the Graham Campus and Health Science Center. Mr. Ball. We need to get going. Okay.
Just as a reminder, you'll notice there's no budgetary considerations required because we're very, very fortunate that a local individual has made the full donation for that project. We'll be naming rights to some of it coming up as we get closer. They're wanting to name that not in themselves, but in honor of someone locally, and they don't know that yet, so we won't. But the full cost is covered by a private donation.
That's very nice. Okay, we'll accept a motion for that approval.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Grimes, second by Lisa Bellows. Additional discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. All right, the next item would be the consideration and amendment to the Great Western Dining Food Service meal rates for the 2024-2025 academic year.
Okay, we have a, a local contractor, Great Western Dining, who's been a partner to us for several years. And recently, we've had some issues with some turnover with Great Western, or they've had these issues, not really our issues, but we did see a decline in their quality of work, the food. So we did ask to meet with the vice president and the president of the company to figure out what we could do to improve that. So they came up with a solution, and that would involve paying their employees a little bit more money, hiring an assistant manager, because the problem is the manager gets kind of burned out because they have to be there 7 days a week. They're basically there from 8 to the evening meal is over with. So anyway, they came up with a new pay scale for their employees and their manager. And what you have before you is that amended rate. The 17 meal plan is now $23.60 for 17 meals per student. That comes out to about $1.40 a meal for the week.
What was it before this increase?
It was $17 and something. I've got it here somewhere.
So $1 a meal?
Yeah, it was $16.71. So they're asking to amend the contract. We've looked at it. We're pretty good for this year as far as paying for it, the increase, covering it. But next year we will have to increase the meal rate for the students.
What's the total cost to us?
Well, we won't know until the students are served. I mean, as you see, if it's 150.
Ballpark, somewhere. $20,000?
What was it last year?
I don't have that information, but normally their contract, time and said and dead at the end of the year, it's running around $220,000, $250,000 a year, somewhere in that
It's
neighborhood.
about another 100 grand probably.
Oh, it can't.
Maybe. I don't know.
What's a percentage?
Just added 40%,
Yeah.
from $1 to $1.40.
It's about a $7 increase or something like that for the 17 mil
Okay,
plan.
makes sense. 100 or less.
We do not consider this a part of the freeze for tuition and fees, because this is not a tuition and fee item. So this will come to the board as to be passed on to the students post this year. When you set the new rates for next year's residential, et cetera, you will be exhorting. So the students will end up paying for that meal plan apart from athletics, which of course are scholarshiped, and we do that through the scholarship side of the athletic program, but we're not.
Financial aid help in any way on the meal plan?
Financial aid can not help directly with meal plan, but there is expenditure, I mean, there's monies for living expenses associated that would if they choose to cover that.
If students are eligible, for example, for Pell Grant, that eligibility is determined
By
based
that.
on what our submitted cost is for room and board. Room and board gets included in that cost of attendance.
And bluntly, we've been talking about that. Dr. Miller's been bringing up that quite a bit. We've been very conservative, thinking we were doing the right thing by being conservative about cost of living. And we increased that to the board last year. We need to continue to increase that because it's actually negatively affecting the ability to draw down their Pell, where we thought we were helping. And so that will be something we'll bring forward, where Pell would even more so cover the expenses associated with room and board, et cetera.
So in June, we'll have a new, we'll approve another contract in June for the next year, so.
Getting us through the rest of the year.
This is just for the rest of this year,
rest of
primary,
this year,
yeah, okay,
yes.
okay. All right. So if someone would like to make the motion, we need to consider this amendment for the Great Western Dining Food Service meal rates for the remainder of this 2024, 2025 academic year.
I'll make the motion.
A motion by Mr. Grimes, do we have a second? Second by Ms. Bellows. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Right. The next item is a consideration and an amendment to the Board of Regents guidelines for criteria governing tax abatements. Mr. Ball.
Right. It's, at the September board meeting, we brought this to you, and Erica had some thoughts about some recommendation for some changes. So it was tabled, and I've got her changes included in this now. And Erica, if you'd like to speak to that, this is fine, because this is a document that y'all own. It's for you. But anyway, Section 8B, there was and that's on page 7. It talks about the inclusive of construction and completion as far as an abatement is concerned. So we limit our abatements to 7 years. So if we make it inclusive of construction and completion, they're really only getting 5 years of abatement period. So Erica is proposing a change to make that exclusive of construction and completion. And on page 7, I've noted that correction. So that's one area. The second area she had a question about was to explain the table on page 8. And that table basically is focused on the jobs. The number of people. So if you had a percentage of, that table has gone up to 15 people, because that's what our abatement guidelines say. If it's 15 or less, you're not going to consider it. But if you were to consider it, you would get a percentage. You could give a percentage of the abatement based on the number of people that was going to be hired. That's what that table is about.
And we're bound
No, you're
No,
not bound by it.
No.
provide an abatement if it complies with this?
No, we can still consider it.
This is your
It's just
guidelines.
we have
Just
to-
guidelines.
to know if under 15, it makes
The-
it easy.
Right.
This is not legal policy. This is a guideline that we would offer individuals wanting to apply for abatement to say, here's what the board typically thinks is a narrative, but we would still be required to bring abatements to a certain extent to you unless you say you want this to be the filter and don't even bother to bring it to us if it doesn't. I mean,
some
you
boards do
reserve,
that.
they do.
Right.
It's up to you all in that case.
What is the reasoning behind the no abatement during construction? Is it just to get the building completed faster, or what is the thought process there?
Mine was that we're actually limiting it to 5 years, because it typically takes 2 years for the construction of a building. So we're saying 7, but they're really only getting 5.
Right.
That with the second one, I posed the question, do we want to base the abatement and percentages on jobs, or do we want to look at valuation? So that was for discussion.
But the intent of it was to be per jobs. That's the explanation of it. But it could be changed. It's up to you if you want to change it.
Since we're in the training business, we're in the people business,
Jobs
I
are.
think the jobs and the number of jobs and the people in the training, et cetera, should be a very high priority to us to consider an abatement.
What if we have a data center and they have low jobs?
That was the example.
And they have a high valuation, and valuation is not considered at all in this.
Yep.
I mean, there's a minimum of 2 to 3 million, but
The data center can be
that
worth
would be an example.
several $100 million, and, I mean, I don't know what the power grid and everything looks like here, but right now in Texas, and you're hearing everywhere, that all the data center craze, but there's definitely it could be a high-valued building that only has 5 employees. And why wouldn't you want
Sure.
something like
Sure.
that here? So I
Still
definitely.
have a case-by-case basis. I just
As
wanted
long as
to
it
pose
comes
the
to the
question.
board case by case, then I don't have a problem with it at all.
What our protocol would be under normal circumstances is either the city or someone comes to us and said, there's this thing that's thinking of coming, they want an abatement. We would provide these as the guidelines to that organization to say, this is what the board typically looks for. Then there's 2 options. What I'm hearing from the board is that you would still like to take them on a case-by-case basis, which is absolutely fine. to Carla, to Ms. Metzler's point earlier, some boards have said, don't even bother to bring it to us if you don't meet that. So that's up to your purview. And so these are guidelines to say, okay, here's the guideline, but we're still going to take each abatement to the board. Not a problem if you
So
want
it'd
to
be
do
your preference.
Yeah, that's y'all's
If we brought it
preference.
to you, and if they didn't meet any of the guidelines, it's still
You
your
can still,
preference to what
yeah.
you want to
What
do.
would be your recommendation of the valuation? Do you have one?
Well, it depends, but just not looking at it at all is something completely different, yeah.
But I mean, if we were gonna develop a guideline, we would say, hey, if it's worth $20 million or more, or,
I mean, Denton County has a scale that they use. We don't have anything in the city of Denton in our policy. We have a $5 million capital investment, but we do base the term on internally. It's not in our policies, internally on the number of years is based on valuation.
So in other words, as you have a greater valuation, you may have a greater abatement year period rather than a
Term.
small industry coming in.
I mean, I definitely don't want to, for a high-valued facility, I would hate to lose.
Sure.
Sure.
Or someone with some company that had a lot of employees or a lot of training for a few employees. I mean, there's so many factors in this that it's difficult for us to just put a stamp out there. That's why I think it should come to the board.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're gonna screen it first, Dr. Wallace, but then I think it should, I mean, you know, if something's just ridiculous, but I think it needs to come to the board, especially in the growth phase and really the undefined growth that our county and especially the city of Gainesville is experiencing. The sky's the limit, you know, we're the roadblock. So where, you know, there's so many things we don't want. We want to set ourselves for success and not become a community or communities of decline from the types of businesses that might come our way or the ones that we don't invite our way. So I
Do
think
you wanna
it's
be
just a-
bogged down by $1 million and one employee that could come at any point?
I think he
That's the-
screens that before it gets to us.
On multiple I mean, this is where we start. This is where we would start. But we also are very good at saying, okay, so it doesn't meet the letter of the law of the procedure, but it's going to give us, I'm just making this up, 300 continuing ed students that we would generate a grant off of, or we have 20 students that need a full associate degree in welding, or we need, you know, those we look at as well to say, okay, yeah, this isn't a great dollar amount on this, but the other piece of this, the training we would do would generate students and meet our mission, to be very honest with you. And I think it's important for you to understand we're going back and looking at those we've abated in the past for the first time in history. And when they don't meet the criteria, we're sending them a tax bill. And so, I mean, that's something we haven't traditionally probably pushed. And that is something that all the entities in Cook County have begun to do, to say, listen, you didn't meet the criteria and yet you still got this abatement hanging out there. You didn't meet the employee number. You didn't meet the valuation number. Here's your bill. And we've gotten some revenue back from some of those that didn't, and then others were able to say, oh, we did, we just didn't do the report. Okay, great. But I think what we would, as an administration, like to see is the passage of the criteria is a base mechanism to help us filter, but we can still bring every abatement we believe of value, or bring them all.
And typically,
board.
Bring them through the finance committee too.
Sure.
And
Right.
we
You
can
can.
refine them there.
Yes.
Before we, you know, have to
Correct.
see them presented 4 times.
typically,
And John, to your point, we're just so new in having a lot of businesses come our way that I think we sort of set a screen for the whole community, all of the taxing entities that consider abatements. We kind of are a screen. I think it's important to keep it there, at least until we start having large growth or a theme of growth. You know, if data centers seem to be the ones that are coming here, or, you know, trailer park manufacturers seem to be the ones that are coming here. I think it's just important for us to stay real close to this while we're in our infancy.
Typically, in the past, with your guidelines, if a abatement is presented, I normally just go through and give you the basics. Well, they don't meet this criteria, they do meet this, they don't. It's up to you to whether you want to use that
Adhere to the.
or use your own. It's a guideline.
Yeah, but I do think it's important that we try to publish our guidelines and stay as close to it as we can, because then we're going to be bouncing all over the road, and that's never good for anybody, so.
I do know that from here on, if an abatement is being presented, I do think that those people need to be here to support it, talk to you about it. So that's going to be one thing we're going to ask them to come and do if they want to present an abatement.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I appreciate Erica's input. She deals with this a lot in Denton County, so I think that her input's good, and I think we've made some strides toward defining some things that were a little vague or left out from before, and we'll continue to work on this, I'm sure, as those opportunities come our way.
A couple of more items there were just some language cleanup that I've got them cleaned up.
All right, very good. At this time, if someone would like to make the motion, we'll accept that motion for the change to the guidelines.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Christy Morris. Do we have a second? Second by Erica Sullivan. Do we have additional discussion at this time? No. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
One more thing. At your table, you have the lovely update 48, I believe it is, for your reading pleasure. We'll come back in March. There's some local policies that have to be approved, so we'll see.
There are
Yeah.
local in here?
Yes, there's about 5, I think. But
And
we'll
I
bring
would-
that to you in March for
Oh,
approval.
there is a couple.
And I would fully expect 49 to come quickly with federal changes, regulations of federal changes. Get ready for 49 to come in the next 3 weeks.
I'd like to have a podcast in which Robbie Ball reads this.
Learning here with us tonight, so we'll just make sure we get that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we already did item D, so we'll move on to item E, which is a consideration of approving a resolution of support for continued investment in the dynamic community college funding model. Okay, why does that say my name?
Well, it says your name because this is the, because this is the CAT resolution.
Oh, that one.
And
Okay, I
so
didn't
what you
I
have.
didn't recognize the name,
Yes,
but
I'm
yes,
sorry.
it's
It has a
okay.
fancy name.
Yeah, it does.
This is what you've done in the past few legislative sessions, and basically what you're saying is you support what has been created through resolution
Yeah.
under House Bill 8 that has been a benefit for the college, and you're supporting that this is the exact language that was provided to all community colleges through the CAT organization. And so that's that resolution
Yes.
you asked for the board to.
Yes, I'm very familiar with this now. The name is just different. But I did talk to the ladies in Austin, and I know that there are several people that have already approved this resolution that are a member or to the CAT organization, and they have heard great support from additional colleges that'll be doing it in their February meeting, because this didn't go out until, so that not everybody had the ability to do it in January. And so it definitely shows support, and I'm hopeful that our board will continue to support this organization and adopt this resolution. So I can make the motion. I'll make the motion that we consider the approval of this resolution to continue the investment dynamic college funding model. Okay, we have a motion by Carla Metzler, second by Lisa Bellows. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed and carried. Thank you. Okay, the next item is consideration of calling the board election on May 3rd, 2025.
So I have Ms. Otto's name next to that in case there's detailed questions, but you have before you what is mandated by state law, and that is that the election would be called on May 3rd. And you've already, we've already posted, she's already got everything online, plus individuals interested in running for the board would be able to pick up a packet or download it online to fill out, return to the office. There are 2 places up. That's the place held by Ms. Morris, place 1, and then place 2 is also up for election, held by Mr. Ott. Those are 6-year terms, is traditional. We've Sandy's done a phenomenal job of working with our local other entities on election. We're trying to share those burdens of responsibility with county and with GISD. Everyone's going to have an election probably this year, but all you're doing right now is saying, here's the early voting locations, here's times, and you're calling that election.
When's the deadline for people to turn stuff in?
February 14th.
All right. All right.
If you have any questions, Sandy can answer them all.
All right, we need a motion to call for the board election on May 3rd, 2025. Mr. Henderson would like to make that motion. We have a second. Second by Ms. Sullivan. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, the next item, number 7, is the executive session, and I do believe we have one this evening. So at this time, I will need to get the right book here to read what we are going to do. Okay, at this time, the board will now recess this regular meeting and go directly into executive session as provided for in the following Texas Government Code. Section 551.072, deliberation about real property. So if you'd like to stay, we'd ask you to leave now, but if you'd like to stay and come back in after we finish it, we'll just hang out there in the hall.